let's just review 3-point perspective real quick. I'm going to say maybe about a quarter to a third of the way down your page. Go ahead and rotate it to where you're looking at your sketchbook like this. We're going to put a horizon line. And then go ahead and put in a vertical horizon. And this is going to be, since we're drawing this thing on a sketchbook, this is going to be fairly well distorted. But if we're sketching an object below the horizon line, and you're sketching it in 3-point perspective, your vertical lines are no longer going to be vertical. We're making this a little bit more true to what we perceive and see. Just like with left vanishing points and right vanishing points, they help us with foreshortening and things get smaller as they get further away from us. When we sketch in 2-point perspective, it makes things somewhat easier, but it's not quite true because things can get further away from us if they go lower away from us or higher away from us. And so we're going to take that into consideration here. So let's sketch a cube, maybe drop down about an inch from the very center of this and put a leading edge of about an inch for a cube. And go ahead and draw the bottom edges of the cube and the top front 2 edges of the cube. And then here's where things get a little more challenging. Instead of drawing a vertical line for the right and left sides of the cube, we're going to draw a line that's going towards this bottom vanishing point. And this is actually a pretty good exercise to do in the sketchbook simply because it does exaggerate. It shows us what we're doing. And then complete that cube. Go ahead and hatch in the right side of this cube. In the past, we've talked about, so we're going to draw a cube just to the right, in line, and this is going to get real distorted, in line with that first cube that we've drawn. So when we were just in simple 2-point perspective and we talked about which sides we would see more of, on this second cube that I'm sketching, should we see more should we see more of the left side or the right side of this second cube? Don't look at my drawing because it's not right. We should see more of the left side. Ah, that's where I messed up. The whole point of this exercise is not lost, but I should see more of the left side of this cube and less of the right side. And it's because that cube is kind of angling. I mean, it's not really rotating any further away from us, but it's as if it's rotating. Now, we want to kind of keep the same thing in mind if we draw a cube below this one. So let's draw one more cube below this one. And so as it gets further away, this leading edge right here on this first cube, my distance should be less on that leading edge as it goes down because I'm seeing more of the top surface, therefore a little bit less of the sides. Yeah.
I'm a little confused about kind of how some of the distortion happens because, like, as you move the cube going further back, it looks like it loses a lot of its square because as it goes further back this way, it's going to angle down.
Well, if we were really to think about where the cone of focus is on this thing, remember those are getting really close to the edge of the cone of focus. So we'll look at some things in just a minute that make a little bit more sense. The distortion is supposed to happen. It's supposed to look as though it's kind of at an angle. Okay, and then so the last thing, and this is where people get a little bit confused. If I'm below the horizon line, then my third point, my third vanishing point is also below the horizon line. If I'm sketching above the horizon line, and we're just going to estimate this one. Let's sketch one more cube above the horizon line, but it switches. So just get one more at the top of this page. And you're going to have to guesstimate, but it switches. Now my vanishing is actually going to take place towards a third vanishing point above the horizon line. It's still sitting on that vertical horizon. But it flips. In fact, if you kind of rotate your sketchbook 180 degrees, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the rules are the same. If you're below that line, it's going to go in one direction. Above it, it's going to go in the other. Now, this is a rule that's very typically, if you're going to do a drawing, if you were doing an architectural drawing of a building that had a whole bunch of stories, it's fairly tall, you would probably ignore this below the horizon line vanishing point, and you just focus on the top one. We'll talk about it in just a second. It's really, in fact, it has a lot to do with the studio exercise yesterday. It creates a little bit more of a dynamic view, right? So if you look at this cube right here compared to just a 2-point perspective cube, it has a little bit more dynamic feel to it. And so it would be, if you're sketching for yourself, typically you're not necessarily going to do this just because it adds an extra element of complexity to it. But if you were doing a presentation rendering and trying to sell somebody on the look of a vehicle, for example, you might use 3-point perspective and it would add a little bit more of a compelling nature to the rendering. Okay, so then on the next page, let's sketch just a couple of simple chairs. So again, let's divide this in half. And I'm going to sketch, I mean, this is almost like a love seat type chair. I'm just going to sketch a simple 2-point perspective cube over here. And I'm going to divide it up into a chair. So here my verticals are vertical. These are the armrests for my chair. Here's my cushion. Here's the back edge. I'm just darkening my object lines. So very simple. It looks very uncomfortable chair. And so hopefully to answer your question, why would you use this? Now let's sketch the exact same chair and let's make the leading edge the vertical horizon line. Yeah. But let's sketch this in 3-point perspective. So I'm going to keep a lot of the other elements of this sketch the same. It's just now when I sketch this outside edge of the chair, I'm going to put it at a slight angle. Again, I've got to estimate the amount of convergence, just like with 2-point perspective and the right and left vanishing point. But my hope is that this is just a slightly more dynamic sketch. I need to make it a little bit wider. So now, just like all of the horizontal lines that have been in our sketches in 2-point perspective, I just have to add some convergence to the verticals. And really on this drawing, it's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines that I've changed. I'm going to try and hide some of my early mistakes. I'm going to hatch this, and instead of hatching the left surface and making it, the right surface and making it darker, I'm just going to hatch all the left-facing left-facing surfaces. You know, that cushion is since it's a different part, I'm going to hatch it with a slightly different angle. I'll do the same thing up here. So can you see just the difference? And it's not much. Again, it's just 6 lines. But the difference in how dynamic it is, I think, is pretty significant. You know, and that we see it just a little bit differently. It speaks to us a little bit better. I think the earlier question was, why would you use this? Well, one reason is to show it a little bit more dynamic. And you really probably would not do this with small objects. Like you probably wouldn't draw a USB drive in 3-point perspective. But you would do it with a little bit larger objects. And what we will do on Thursday, today is Thursday, isn't it? What we will do on Tuesday is we'll draw a couple of products that kind of are a little bit larger. We'll actually, in those exercises, we'll utilize everything that we talked about today. And let's call this IC10, those 2 pages that we just did.